Here we go again. Life's a dream, but it's never what it seems. Here we go again. All right, I'm gonna make sure I line myself up. I got my lights off in the background. This one's gonna be a bit longer than the Gunna review, but I'll try to knock it out the park. Let's go. Time for me to review The Weeknd's latest project, Dawn FM. Hey, Slater here. Time for me to review The Weeknd's latest project, Dawn FM. For some context into The Weeknd, I found out about him whenever most people my age found out about him after he released Wicked Games and House of Balloons. I've been a fan of him ever since, and it's been really cool to see how he's changed over the years. He's well known as one of the best musicians from the previous decade, and even after his 2016 release Starboy, where I feel like he redefined himself, he managed to do it once again on his last album, After Hours, as this blend of all of his musical styles from different eras. He's most known today as one of the biggest acts in music, primarily with his retro pop and groovy style. Speaking of After Hours, I really love how mature and narratively driven that album was, but even with that, it had some great hits all through the tracklist, including one of the biggest hits of all time, Blinding Lights. And I can always appreciate an artist that's able to show off their creative ability while also making some big radio hits. Also, The Weeknd announced that fans are currently experiencing a new trilogy with his recent music, with Dawn FM being the second installment following After Hours, and it's expected that there's going to be one more project to follow up eventually. When it comes to this follow-up in Dawn FM, I think this is a haunting, groovy, and overall memorable experience to open up the new year. I was very excited to hear new music from The Weeknd, and since my favorite movie of all time is The Truman Show, I was even more happy to hear that Jim Carrey would play a big role in this album. This album also features a vocal passage from Quincy Jones, as well as some unnecessary features from Tyler the Creator and Lil Wayne, but I'll get to those later. Right off the bat, at the start of this album on the title track, you hear The Weeknd's heavenly vocals paired with Jim Carrey's smooth operator voice, welcoming you into this new world, and you also hear this subtle background voice saying, "Free yourself," and I feel like this is the perfect introduction into what this album is going to be. Afterwards, we go into Gasoline, and I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of The Weeknd's voice on this track. On my first listen of the album, I didn't like it, but I thought it would be something that grows on me, but I'm still just not feeling it. It's something about the voice mixed in with the delivery of the verses that just makes me so uncomfortable, but the chorus is still fine to me. On the next few tracks, thematically we see The Weeknd removed from his last album, looking for someone to make him whole again and looking for a new partner, before realizing that he may be the problem and maybe he's too broken to be fixed. On these tracks especially is when I started to feel like The Weeknd has mastered the ability to perfectly balance his crispy and angelic vocals alongside some elite and atmospheric production. I mean, just look at a song like Take My Breath. An already amazing single released before this album somehow turned even better with an extended version, and it doesn't even feel that much longer than the original whenever you listen to it. And just to note, The Weeknd has production credits on just about every song on this album, if not every single one. I always love when artists are able to take over their craft and see through their vision through the help of others, even if they don't possess the technical prowess to produce some of their own instrumentals. The sixth track sees us at A Tale by Quincy, narrated by Quincy Jones. He details his family history and explains how that history and everything he went through affected him as a man. Not only did it affect his mental process, but his childhood trauma seeped its way into many of his relationships, including close family, friends, and his romantic partners. He details that whenever he and a woman would get too close romantically, he would cut her off out of fear and out of that childhood trauma where he was taught that he did not need someone to look after him. I think this interlude serves a great purpose on this album since The Weeknd is constantly writing songs about his romantic challenges, whether it be on this album or any of his previous work, something like After Hours on a track like Hardest to Love. Hearing a narrator's perspective on this really sets the stage for the next song, which is already my favorite song of the year, Out of Time. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this song features a perfect instrumental and perfect vocals from The Weeknd. I could easily see the song going down as a classic within The Weeknd's discography and being one of those tracks that I frequently revisit for years to come. Next in the track list, we have Here We Go Again, and let me just say, I love Tyler, I love Wayne, but this project did not need either of them as featured artists. I don't think their verses were bad per se, but I just feel like their verses were so forced that it really leaves me wondering how this came to be since The Weeknd has never worked with either of them. I don't feel like they add much to either song, and it actually feels like they actively stop the momentum in the song just so we can hear their part. It's like in basketball whenever you see a play where all the players are swinging the ball across the perimeter and there has to be that one player that's the ball stopper and just starts dribbling and doing too much and you're just like, pass the ball! I mean, that's what these features feel like. Continuing on with the album though, I feel like the narrative is fairly easy to follow. This album does a great job of having some easily digestible songs for the 103.5 Dawn FM radio station The Weeknd goes for, while also having those songs where he talks about his relationship wants and needs, or troubles in some cases. Another track that I'd like to point out is Every Angel is Terrifying. which sees The Weeknd doing a bit of spoken word before we hear an infomercial promoting the product Afterlife. Since The Weeknd announced that we're in the middle of hearing another trilogy from him, a lot of people took this song to mean that his next album will be called Afterlife. But I tend to think that has more to do with this album, perhaps an alternate title to go along with its predecessor, After Hours, moving into Afterlife, and the third project. You get the deal. Lastly, to wrap up the album, we're hit with yet another highlight from The Weeknd on the track Less Than Zero. Before Jim Carrey closes us off with some bars and hits us with one of my favorite lines from the whole project, you have to be heaven to see heaven. Reinforcing the idea that a lot of people have expressed and talked about, saying that happiness and self-worth only comes from within. This album was an experience, something we don't get too often from the mainstream music palette nowadays. Yes, it has some great radio hits to extract out for those who want that, but it also is a great and fun listen for those who just like to sit down and listen to an album from start to finish. Although this album isn't as strong as After Hours, it's definitely a worthwhile follow-up, and it gives me hope that this will be another great year for music. My favorite tracks on this album are Dawn FM, Take My Breath, Out of Time, and Less Than Zero. And as for a rating, I'm feeling an 8 out of 10 on this album. Thanks for watching, but let me know what you thought of this album. Were you impressed? Were you let down? Also, let me know some of your favorite songs and or features. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to show support. And until next time. I'm sounding like Slater Fantano in this, okay? Big words. Sorry, Ebo.